2 words. That's all the American president typed. Thank you. Not after a victory, not after a surrender, not after some historic peace agreement signed in the Rose Garden. After Iran, the country America had been bombing for 48 straight days, decided, on its own, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. On Iran's terms. On Iran's timeline. The United States had deployed 16 warships, 10,000 troops, a full naval blockade choking Iran's ports. The Secretary of Defense walked to the Pentagon podium and looked into the cameras and said, "And I need you to actually hear these words, you can't control anything." That was America's message to Iran. And then the president typed "thank you" in capital letters. That's not what maximum pressure looks like when it works. That's not what you can't control anything produces. Something else happened here. Something far bigger than a ceasefire. Something that every foreign ministry on earth is studying right now. Something that will determine who actually runs this world for the next 50 years. And mainstream media has completely missed it. Forget the missiles. Forget the warships. Forget everything you've seen on the news about this conflict. Because the real story isn't happening on a battlefield. It's buried in a spreadsheet, a Chinese customs report. And there is one number inside that document that, once you see it, makes everything else snap into place. That number is 1.3 million. 1.3 million barrels of crude oil per day, officially recorded by Chinese customs as imports from Malaysia, in 2025. During the height of this crisis, sounds normal, until you ask one question. How much oil does Malaysia actually produce? Approximately 600,000 barrels per day. Every barrel, every well, every offshore platform. That is Malaysia's total national output. China was officially importing more than double what Malaysia is physically capable of producing. Stop and think about what that means. That oil was not Malaysian. The paperwork said Malaysia. The ships said Malaysia. The customs records said Malaysia. But the oil? The oil was Iranian. And the moment you understand how it got there, how it moved invisibly through a blockade of 16 American warships, everything about this crisis becomes completely clear. Iran has been under crushing American sanctions for years. America didn't just sanction Iran. America built a cage around Iran's entire economy, cut it off from the global banking system, told every country on earth, buy Iranian oil and face consequences, designed a financial prison so airtight that Iran should have been begging for a deal within weeks. So how was 1.3 million barrels a day flowing out invisibly right through the middle of it? Here's the part Washington refused to take seriously. China didn't break the sanctions with soldiers, didn't challenge America with warships, didn't make a single dramatic declaration. China quietly spent a decade building a system that made the sanctions irrelevant. With paperwork, with payment networks, with tankers that vanished from satellite tracking, and with a strategic reserve so enormous it could swallow a global energy crisis whole and never flinch. But here's the problem: that system isn't just infrastructure. It's a weapon. The most powerful kind, the kind you never see coming, the kind that's already been used before you even know the war started. This is the architecture that kept Iran alive through 48 days of the most intensive American bombing campaign in the Middle East since the Gulf War. And once you understand how it was built, you will never look at American power the same way again. 3 layers, each one more staggering than the last. Layer 1, the invisible money. American sanctions work through SWIFT. That's the global financial network that connects banks and processes international dollar payments. When America cuts you off from SWIFT, it's over. No dollars in, no dollars out. You can't import food. You can't pay soldiers. You can't buy parts for your power grid. Your economy starts dying in real time. That is the weapon. That is why sanctions work. But here's what nobody in Washington wanted to admit. China built a parallel payment system. For years, quietly, China has been paying for Iranian oil in Chinese yuan, routed through second-tier Chinese banks that have zero exposure to the American financial system. Banks with no dollar assets America can freeze. No correspondent relationships America can threaten. No vulnerabilities America can exploit. The yuan flows directly to Iranian accounts, through channels SWIFT sanctions can't touch, through a door in the wall that China built and handed Iran the key to. America's most powerful financial weapon, neutralized, not with a counterstrike, with accounting. Layer 2, the ghost fleet. You've heard of ghost ships. What happened here was an entire ghost economy. Chinese-linked tankers would disable their AIS transponders, the GPS systems that let satellites track where ships are. They'd go dark, completely invisible. Then they'd sail to remote coordinates in international waters, nowhere near a port, nowhere near surveillance, and pull alongside another tanker. Ship to ship, in open ocean, Iranian crude transferred across in the dark. The receiving vessel? Clean flag, clean registration, clean ownership history on paper. It would sail into a Chinese refinery and declare its cargo as Malaysian crude, or Iraqi, or Omani. The oil moved. The paperwork lied, and Chinese customs recorded 1.3 million barrels from Malaysia. America built financial walls around Iran's oil. China built a logistics network that went completely under them, invisible, international, untouchable. Layer 3, and this is the one that should stop you cold. Before a single bomb fell on Iran, before the strait closed, before the crisis even started, China had already been quietly filling warehouses for 2 years. Buying sanctioned oil, Iranian crude, Russian crude at massive discounts, stockpiling it, building a strategic reserve of approximately 1.2 billion barrels. When the Strait of Hormuz closed and global oil prices exploded past $120 a barrel, China didn't blink. Chinese refineries kept running. Chinese factories kept producing. The Chinese economy kept moving. Meanwhile, and this is the part that should genuinely disturb you, the chief of the International Energy Agency stood in front of cameras and warned that Europe had approximately 6 weeks of jet fuel supply remaining. 6 weeks. China had 4 months of cover, already in storage, already paid for, already waiting. The energy shock America designed to break Iran, to crash global markets, terrify Iran's regional allies, and force a desperate surrender landed on Europe, landed on developing economies, landed on global supply chains. It didn't land on China, and it didn't land on Iran, because China had already absorbed the blast before the trigger was ever pulled. Here's where this story gets truly difficult to process. China never fired a shot, not one. When a Chinese-owned tanker tried to pass through the strait under a false flag with a spoofed transponder, it turned around the moment American warships issued a warning. China stayed carefully, deliberately, surgically below every threshold of direct military confrontation throughout this entire. On the surface, China looked neutral. But what China actually was, what it has quietly been building toward for years, is something military alliances can't match, something warships can't sink, something no bomb can destroy. China was Iran's economic immune system, the buyer that kept Iran's oil revenue flowing when America tried to cut it off, the veto that blocked the UN Security Council resolution that would have authorized international force to reopen the strait, the phone call China's foreign minister to Iran's foreign minister days before the strait reopened that signaled Beijing was ready to back a diplomatic exit. That phone call changed everything, because it gave Iran exactly what it needed to reframe this moment. Iran didn't say, "We give up, the strait is open." Iran said, "In recognition of the Lebanon ceasefire, we are opening the strait as a gesture of goodwill, a gesture of goodwill." And the President of the United States responded, "Thank you." That difference between a country that was broken and surrendered and a country that made a calculated choice on its own terms, that difference was manufactured in Beijing, not with weapons, with UN accounts and invisible tankers and 1.2 billion barrels of strategic patience. To understand how historic this moment actually is, you need to go back to 1956. Britain and France launched a military operation to retake the Suez Canal. Egypt's President Nasser had nationalized it, taken it, and the two great European powers were going to take it back. The operation worked. British and French forces were advancing on the ground, winning. The battlefield outcome was not in doubt. Then the United States made one phone call. America told Britain, "We will not support the pound sterling if you do not withdraw." That's it. No troops, no missiles, no declaration of war. One economic threat. Britain's currency reserves were nearly gone. The pound was days from collapse. Faced with financial ruin, not military defeat, Britain pulled out. France followed. Nasser kept the canal. History calls it Britain's Suez moment, the day the British Empire learned the brutal lesson that military victory means nothing, absolutely nothing, when someone more powerful can pull the economic floor out from under you. What just happened at the Strait of Hormuz is America's Suez moment. Not because America lost on the battlefield. America didn't lose on the battlefield. Because America showed up to a financial war with military weapons, and the other side had already won the financial war before the shooting started. America's maximum pressure toolkit, the sanctions, the blockade, the naval power, the financial cutoffs, ran directly into a counter-architecture a decade in the making, an architecture that kept the target alive, kept its money flowing, absorbed the shock, and gave it the stability to pick its own exit. America brought maximum force. China had already built maximum resilience, and every government on earth watched it happen in real time. Now ask the question nobody in mainstream commentary will ask out loud. If China's invisible architecture gave Iran, a mid-sized economy, under crushing sanctions, the ability to survive 48 days of American bombing and choose its own exit terms, what does that mean for every country that comes next? Look at the pattern. It's been hiding in plain sight. North Korea. 30 years of American sanctions, still standing, still nuclear, still defiant. Venezuela. Years of maximum pressure. The government America wanted gone is still there. Russia. The most sweeping, comprehensive sanctions regime in modern history, launched after 2022. Russia is still fighting a full-scale war in Ukraine, still funding it, still sustaining it. And now Iran. 48 days of bombing, a naval blockade, maximum pressure in its most literal military form, and Iran still walked out choosing its own terms. Every single time. Same result. One common thread. China. Yuan payment systems operating outside the dollar. China as the buyer of last resort for sanctioned oil. Chinese strategic reserves neutralizing the energy weapon. The Chinese UN Security Council veto blocking international enforcement. This is not a coincidence. This is not improvisation. This is a deliberate, decade-long strategy to build an alternative architecture to the American-led global financial system, constructed quietly, constructed patiently, without confrontation, without declaration, without a single dramatic moment that America could point to and say that's the threat, that's what we're countering. Just invisible infrastructure, laid piece by piece, until the day it was needed. And then Spain's prime minister stood up in the middle of this crisis and said what every foreign minister in the world was privately thinking. There is nobody else who can resolve this situation except China. That is not a diplomatic observation. That is a verdict on who actually holds power in the new architecture of this world. Here's the part that should genuinely keep you up at night. This isn't over, not even close. The ceasefire has a deadline. Iran still holds enriched uranium. The nuclear question, the actual question that started all of this, remains completely unresolved. The American blockade on Iranian ports is still in place. The underlying conflict hasn't been solved. It's been paused. But look at who's sitting at the negotiating table now and in what position. Iran held the world's most critical energy choke point for 48 days, absorbed the most intensive American military campaign in the region in decades, survived a full naval blockade, and still got to choose how this chapter ended. That negotiating position was built in Beijing, not with armies, not with missiles, not with public declarations of solidarity, with UN accounts, with ships that disappeared from satellite tracking, with 1.2 billion barrels of crude oil sitting quietly in Chinese storage facilities, with a veto card played at the exact right moment in the Security Council. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. America put 16 warships and 10,000 personnel in those 33 kilometers, and the president still had to type "thank you." That gap between the power America deployed and the outcome America actually achieved, that gap is 10 years of China's invisible work, made visible in a single moment, on a single day, in 2 capital letters. Every great empire in history has faced a moment when it discovered the rules changed while it wasn't watching, not at the end of a gun barrel. At the end of a balance sheet, America still controls the dollar, still controls SWIFT, still commands the most powerful military force in human history. None of that is gone. But here is the question that no general, no senator, no defense contractor has a clean answer to. If China's invisible economic architecture can carry a mid-sized sanctioned country through 48 days of American bombing and a naval blockade and deliver it to the negotiating table with leverage, what happens the next time? What happens when the country is in Iran? What happens when it's bigger? When the economic ties are deeper? When the architecture is even more developed than it is today? Watch the next round of negotiations. Watch carefully. But don't watch what Iran demands. Don't watch what America threatens. Watch what China doesn't say. Watch what China doesn't do. Because in every major power shift in modern history, the actor who changed the world the most was the one who said the least while building the most. The question isn't whether America can win the next military confrontation. The question is whether America can win the next one when the battlefield isn't a strait, it's a spreadsheet. Drop your answer in the comments. Is America's sanctions toolkit broken for good, or is there still a way back? Because how you answer that question determines everything you believe about the next 10 years of global power. And if you want to be the person in the room who actually understands what's happening before the headlines catch up, before the think tanks publish their reports, before everyone else figures out what they just watched, you already know what to do.